Dawn broke cold over Oak Ridge, Nebraska. January frost thick as paint on the hangar doors. Warren Dalton, 67, stood in the gravel lot outside his private airstrip, breath hanging white in the still air. The windsock hung limp, frozen stiff. He wrapped both hands around the propeller hub of his Piper Pawnee, the old crop duster he hadn't flown in 3 years, and began the morning ritual. Polish in slow circles, each pass deliberate as prayer. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with black coffee from his thermos. Cold metal bit through his work gloves. 3 nights ago, Diane had stood up at the Rotary Club dinner, Marcus Brentwood's hand resting on her lower back. "Warren and I are separating," she'd announced to 200 people. "Marcus has offered me a fresh start." Polite applause, half pity, half confusion. Marcus had raised his glass. "To new beginnings. Some of us still have them." Warren drove home alone that night and found unsigned refinance papers on the kitchen table. Diane's note clipped to the top. CA business trip with Marcus, April 10th. Private jet finally traveling right. She had no idea what he'd built. Neither did Marcus. Gravel crunched behind him, Cal's truck. Cal Hayes climbed out of his pickup, moving slow the way 71-year-old men do when their knees remember Korea. He didn't say good morning. He carried a manila folder under one arm and a thermos of his own coffee in the other hand. The diesel engine ticked as it cooled. "War," Cal said. That was all. Warren set down the polish rag. His fingers were stiff, the propeller half done. One side gleamed in the weak sunlight. The other showed spots of oxidation he hadn't gotten to yet. Cal walked past him into the hangar without waiting for an invitation. Warren followed. Inside, the space smelled like old leather and engine oil. A wood-burning stove squatted in the corner, unlit. Cal spread the folder's contents across the workbench. Photocopies, 20 or 30 pages, some with Sky Harvest Aviation logos at the top. "She was here," Cal said. 3 nights last month, late. Said she was looking for your insurance paperwork." Warren picked up the first sheet. A lease agreement, dated 2015, his signature at the bottom, though he didn't remember signing it here, in this hangar. Someone had circled the ownership structure in red ink, drawn arrows, made notes in handwriting he recognized. Diane's, small and precise. "I didn't think much of it at the time," Cal continued. He poured coffee into the thermos cap, hands steady despite his age. "But then I saw her car again, and again, always after 9, always when you were in town for those damn depositions." Warren flipped through the pages. Aircraft tail numbers, registration documents, corporate trust filings, all marked up, all studied. His chest felt tight. "Somebody wanted to know who holds the money," Cal said quietly. Outside, a meadowlark called, early for the season, confused by a warm afternoon 2 days prior. Inside the hangar, silence. Warren set the papers down and walked to the small window that overlooked the gravel runway. Ice crystals had formed in the corners of the glass. "She marked every document that had your name on it," Cal added. "Or your father's trust. Somebody's building a case, War, and it ain't for your benefit." Warren thought about the unsigned refinance papers. The deadline, March 1st. That was the cutoff for spring planning loans. Marcus Brentwood's firm, Heartland Agricultural Finance, held mortgages on 6 farms in the county, maybe more. "This isn't just about the divorce," Warren said. "No," Cal agreed. "It ain't." Warren turned from the window. Cal was watching him with the kind of patience that comes from decades of friendship, the kind that doesn't need to be explained or earned anymore. They'd known each other since Warren was 19, and Cal was teaching him how to read altimeters properly, how to feel the wind before trusting the instruments. "She's leaving with him," Warren said. "Taking half of everything, the house, the land, probably this airstrip if her lawyer's any good." Cal sipped his coffee. "Your daddy bought this land in 46 with his discharge pay." "I know. First Dalton to own something outright in 3 generations." "I know, Cal. So what are you going to do?" Warren picked up the polish rag from where he'd left it on the bench. He ran his thumb over the cloth, feeling the grit of metal polish embedded in the fibers. His father had used this same rag, or one like it. The ritual mattered more than the tool. "I'm going to finish polishing that propeller," Warren said. "Then I'm going to figure out what the hell she gave to Marcus." Cal nodded, satisfied. He gathered up the papers and slid them back into the folder, but he left it on the bench. "I made copies," he said. "These are yours. Originals are in my lockbox at home, case something happens." "Nothing's going to happen." "Probably not," Cal agreed. "But your daddy didn't teach you to fly without checking your instruments first." They walked back outside together. The sun had climbed higher, but the temperature hadn't improved. Warren's truck thermometer had read 14 degrees when he'd arrived at dawn. The windsock still hung frozen. Warren returned to the propeller and resumed polishing. Cal stood nearby, drinking coffee, not offering to help because he knew better. This was Warren's ritual, his meditation. Some men prayed in churches. Warren Dalton prayed with a rag and a propeller hub. After 20 minutes, Cal spoke again. "You gonna call Jenny?" Warren's hand paused mid-circle. His daughter, 200 miles away in Lincoln. They hadn't spoken in 4 months, maybe 5. She'd sent a Christmas card. He'd sent one back. "Don't know what I'd tell her," Warren said. "Could start with the truth?" Warren resumed polishing. The metal was warming under his hand now, reflecting the pale winter sun. "Truth is, I don't know what's happening yet. Not all of it." Cal poured the last of his coffee onto the gravel. It steamed briefly and then froze. "Well," he said, "you better figure it out, because Marcus Brentwood don't strike me as the patient type." He climbed back into his truck and left Warren alone with the wind and the cold and a propeller that was almost but not quite clean. Warren walked back to his own truck and found the refinance papers on the passenger seat where he'd left them. He unfolded them carefully. Marcus's firm logo at the top, Heartland Agricultural Finance Corp., serving Nebraska's farming community since 1987. At the bottom, in fine print, winter planting deadline, March 1st. Failure to refinance may result in asset redistribution per divorce settlement clause 7B. Warren checked his watch, his father's altimeter watch, the one that had survived World War II, and 40 years of crop dusting. It was January 18th. 6 weeks until the deadline. He looked back at the hangar. Through the open door, he could see the workbench where Cal had spread those papers, Diane's handwriting circling the parts that mattered. The deadline wasn't just for refinancing, it was for something bigger. And she'd known about it before he did. Sunday morning, First Lutheran Church sat at the corner of Main and Oak like it had for 130 years. Warren pulled into the gravel lot 20 minutes before service. The building's white paint needed work. Most things in Oak Ridge did. Inside, the pews smelled like old hymnals and Murphy's oil soap. Warren took his usual spot in the back, third row from the rear, right side. He'd sat there since childhood, when his mother had insisted on proximity to the exit in case he got restless. The church filled slowly. Rita Nordstrom arrived in a purple coat that was too bright for January, her husband Frank trailing behind in coveralls and a clean flannel shirt. They spotted Warren, and Rita's eyes went wide. Not surprise, but the kind of recognition that comes before gossip. She leaned into Frank's ear. Frank glanced at Warren, then away. By the time Pastor Jim took the pulpit, half the congregation had done the same. Look, lean, whisper. The other half avoided Warren's eyes entirely, studying their bulletins like doctoral theses. Rita's voice carried better than she thought it did. 40 years, she whispered to Frank, loud enough for the row ahead to hear. He ignored her for 40 years. What did he expect? Frank murmured something back, low and indistinct. "Well, Marcus Brentwood treats her like a lady," Rita continued. "Takes her places, that's all I'm saying." Warren kept his eyes forward. The organ began its prelude, notes climbing slow and mournful. He could feel the weight of attention on his shoulders, the way you feel sun, even with your eyes closed. Pastor Jim's sermon was about inheritance. "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." The words echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Warren thought about his father's land, the airstrip, the 5 acres that had been in the family since 1946, thought about how quickly inheritance could be taken by lawyers and judges and people who confused paperwork with ownership. After the service, people filed out without meeting his gaze. Rita and Frank passed close enough that Warren could smell her perfume, something floral and aggressive. Frank gave him the smallest nod. Solidarity, maybe, or pity, hard to tell the difference sometimes. Warren sat in the pew for 5 minutes after everyone left, listening to the building settle. Then he drove to the lawyer's office. Paulson and Associates occupied a converted house on 2nd Street. The waiting room had carpet the color of old mustard and magazines from 2 years ago. Warren sat in a chair that wheezed when he shifted his weight. Attorney Paulson appeared in the doorway after 10 minutes. He was younger than Warren expected, maybe 45, with wireframe glasses and a tie that was trying too hard to be serious. "Mr. Dalton, come on back." The office smelled like coffee and printer toner. Legal pads covered the desk in overlapping layers. Paulson gestured to a chair and sat down heavily in his own. "I've reviewed the filing your wife's attorney submitted," Paulson said. He opened a folder, thicker than it should have been for a simple divorce. "I'll be direct with you. This isn't a standard separation." Warren waited. "Your wife is claiming you hid marital assets." Paulson continued. Specifically, aviation investments held in trust structures. She's alleging financial deception spanning multiple years. I didn't hide anything, Warren said. That may be true, but perception matters in family court. Paulson flipped through papers. The trust your father established in 1946, the one that holds the airstrip and related assets, your wife's attorney is arguing that subsequent investments made using trust income qualify as marital property. They're seeking a 50-50 split of everything, including the land. Warren felt something cold settle in his chest. My father's land. Legally, it's complicated. The trust protects certain assets, but not all of them. And there's another issue. Paulson removed his glasses and cleaned them with a cloth from his desk drawer. Your wife's attorney is Gerald Morrison. He and Marcus Brentwood were college roommates. Morrison's firm has represented Heartland Agricultural Finance in 6 separate cases over the past 3 years. The cold in Warren's chest spread to his limbs. So they're coordinating. I can't prove coordination, but the appearance concerns me. Additionally, Morrison filed for an immediate 60-day asset freeze, no transfers, no sales, no major financial decisions until the court rules on asset division. That freeze takes effect tomorrow. What about the refinance deadline? Warren asked. Paulson looked up sharply. What refinance? Warren explained about the papers on his kitchen table, the March 1st deadline, Marcus's firm logo at the top. Paulson's face changed as he listened. Not surprise, but something harder. Recognition. That's clever, Paulson said quietly. Extraordinarily clever. They're using the asset freeze to prevent you from refinancing, which triggers default clauses in your existing loans. When you default, the lender, Marcus's firm, can initiate foreclosure proceedings. They're not just trying to take half, they're trying to take everything. Outside the window, a truck rumbled past. Its engine backfired once, sharp as a gunshot. Warren's hands were folded in his lap, fingers interlaced. He could feel his pulse in his thumbs. Can you stop it? He asked. Paulson put his glasses back on. Not unless we can prove fraud or conflict of interest, and even then, you'd need evidence. Documentation, something concrete that shows Morrison and Brentwood are colluding to manipulate the legal process. How long would that take? Longer than 60 days. Paulson closed the folder. Mr. Dalton, your wife's attorney is Marcus's college roommate. You're fighting a stacked deck, and the house always wins when the dealer controls the cards. Warren stood. The chair wheezed again as his weight left it. He walked to the window and looked out at 2nd Street. The sky was the color of old iron. My father bought that land with his discharge pay, Warren said. 1946. He was 23 years old and he'd just survived a war. That land was supposed to mean something. I understand, Paulson said. But the court doesn't care about legacy, it cares about statutes and precedents, and right now those favor your wife. Warren turned from the window. Then I need to change what the court cares about. Paulson's expression didn't change. Be careful, Mr. Dalton. Desperate men make mistakes, and mistakes in family court are permanent. Warren left without shaking hands. Outside, the air had warmed just enough to make the frost wet. His boots left prints on the sidewalk. By the time he reached his truck, the prints had already started to freeze solid again. 4:30 the next morning, Warren arrived at the hangar to find Cal's truck already parked in the gravel. Light spilled from the open door. Inside, the wood stove crackled, throwing heat into the cold space. Cal stood at the workbench with a percolator brewing on a hot plate, the smell of coffee mixing with wood smoke and old engine oil. Figured you'd be early, Cal said without turning around. Warren closed the door behind him. The wind had picked up overnight, and the metal walls creaked with each gust. He walked to the workbench and saw what Cal had laid out. The copied documents from before, plus new ones. Bank statements, loan records, aircraft registration renewals dating back 15 years. Couldn't sleep, Cal said. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups, the kind that burned your hands if you weren't careful. Got to thinking about what you said, about your daddy's land. Warren accepted the cup and held it with both hands, letting the heat seep through his gloves. Paulson says I'm fighting a stacked deck. Paulson's not wrong, Cal tapped one of the documents. But he's not looking at the whole table. Your daddy didn't just teach you to fly, War. He taught you to check your instruments before takeoff. So I checked. Warren set down his coffee and leaned over the papers. Cal had organized them by date, each stack labeled with a handwritten note card in his careful block letters. These are your trust filings, Cal said, pointing to the first stack. 1946 through present. Your daddy set it up so the land stayed in the family no matter what happened. Divorce, bankruptcy, whatever. The trust protects it. Paulson said the investments made from trust income don't have the same protection. He's right about that, but look at this. Cal pulled out a different document, a lease agreement with Sky Harvest Aviation letterhead. 1908 financial crisis. Half the farms in this county were about to go under, including 6 that your daddy had helped 30 years before. You remember that year? Warren nodded slowly. He remembered working 18-hour days, remembered the phone calls at midnight from farmers who couldn't make their payments, remembered making decisions that Diane had called reckless. You used trust income to buy into Sky Harvest Aviation, Cal continued. Silent partner, 60% equity, but your name stays off the public paperwork. The company leases aircraft to agricultural operations, corporate clients, whoever needs them. It's been profitable for 16 years. I know all this, Warren said, but you don't know who's been leasing from Sky Harvest. Cal pulled out another document and laid it flat on the bench. Look at the client list. Go down to item 17. Warren scanned the page. The list was alphabetical. He found item 17 and his breath caught. Heartland Agricultural Finance Corp., 3-year lease agreement for executive air travel. Signed 2015, renewed 2018, renewed again 2021. The signature at the bottom belonged to Marcus Brentwood, Regional Vice President. Son of a bitch, Warren said quietly. That's not even the best part. Cal was almost smiling now, the way he used to smile when Warren figured out a difficult maneuver in the air. Marcus's firm has been leasing jets from you for 9 years. Corporate travel, client meetings, the whole executive package. And he has no idea you're the money behind Sky Harvest. The trust structure keeps your name buried 3 layers deep. Warren picked up the document and held it to the light, as if checking for forgery. The paper was real. The signature was real. Marcus Brentwood had been paying Warren's company for executive jet service while simultaneously trying to seize Warren's land. They've been billing clients a 40% markup on your assets, Cal added. Standard industry practice, but still. Every time Marcus flies to a client meeting, you get a piece of the action. Has been for almost a decade. Outside, the windsock snapped taut, audible even through the hangar walls. Warren set the document down carefully as if it might shatter. Does Diane know? He asked. Cal shook his head. Nobody knows except me, you, and the corporate lawyers who filed the trust paperwork. That's how you wanted it back in '08. Stay quiet, help people, without making a show of it. Well, congratulations. You stayed so quiet your own wife didn't know you owned the company her boyfriend's been using. Warren walked to the window. Dawn was still an hour away, but the sky had started to lighten from black to deep blue. He could see the outline of his Piper Pawnee through the glass, the propeller still only half polished from yesterday. This doesn't solve the immediate problem, Warren said. The asset freeze, the refinance deadline. Even if Marcus is leasing from me, that doesn't prove collusion with Morrison. No, Cal agreed. But it's leverage, and right now you don't have much of that. Warren turned from the window. Cal was watching him with that patient expression, the one that said he'd already thought 3 steps ahead, but was waiting for Warren to catch up. I need proof of collusion, Warren said. Something that shows Morrison and Marcus are coordinating. Otherwise, it's just coincidence. Then we find proof. Cal poured more coffee for both of them. But first, you need help from somebody who knows how this game is played. Somebody who understands divorce law and corporate ethics and all the ways men like Marcus Brentwood cheat the system. Warren knew what Cal was suggesting. He'd known since the night Diane announced the separation. Jenny hasn't spoken to me in months, Warren said. Then it's time to call your daughter. Cal raised his tin cup. Before this gets any worse. Warren pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked in one corner, the phone itself 4 years old. He scrolled through his contacts until he found Jenny's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. She's going to ask why I waited, Warren said. Probably. Cal sipped his coffee. And you're going to tell her the truth. That you're a stubborn old man who thought he could handle it alone. She'll yell at you for 5 minutes, then she'll help. That's what family does. Warren pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice. On the 3rd ring, Jenny's voice came through, groggy, confused. Dad? It's 5 in the morning. What's wrong? Warren looked at Cal, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. I need your help, Warren said. Your mother's trying to take the farm, and I think her lawyer's in on it. Silence on the other end. Then, tell me everything. 2 weeks later, Marcus Brentwood hosted an agricultural finance roundtable at the Oak Ridge Country Club. Warren wasn't invited. He heard about it from Tom Rickman, who managed the town's only independent bank and made a point of knowing everyone's business before it became public. They met at the diner on Main Street mid-afternoon when the lunch crowd had cleared. The booth vinyl was cracked and patched with duct tape. The air smelled like fryer grease and burned coffee. Marcus rented the whole banquet room, Tom said, keeping his voice low even though they were alone. 23 farmers showed up. He bought them ribeye steaks and talked about streamlined loan restructuring. That's code for tightening the screws. Warren pushed his coffee cup in slow circles on the Formica table. What's he offering? Debt consolidation at lower rates. Sounds good on paper, but the fine print gives Heartland first right of refusal on any land sales for the next 5 years. And if you miss a single payment, they can call the whole loan due immediately. No grace period. How many signed? Tom's face went hard. 3 so far: Jimmy Peterson, the Kowalski Place, and Dale Marsh. All of them got hit hard by last year's drought. Marcus made it sound like a lifeline. Warren stared out the window. Across the street, the hardware store's awning flapped in the wind. The temperature had climbed to 32 degrees, warm enough for the ice on the sidewalks to turn to slush. He's isolating me, Warren said. That's exactly what he's doing. 3 of those farms, Jimmy's, the Kowalskis, Dale's, they all got silent loans from you back in '08. Marcus is offering buyouts contingent on them cutting ties with what he calls legacy lenders. He never says your name, but everyone knows who he means. The waitress refilled their coffee without asking. Her name tag said Brenda, and she'd worked at the diner for 30 years. She gave Warren's shoulder a brief squeeze as she left. Not pity, just acknowledgement. Small-town language that needed no translation. Ed Kowalski's got stage 4 cancer, Tom continued. His medical bills are crushing him. Marcus knows that. He's offering to cover the bills in exchange for the farm. Ed's wife is ready to sign. Warren felt something cold and familiar settle in his gut. The same feeling he used to get in the air when the weather turned faster than the forecast predicted and there was no safe place to land. I can't compete with medical bills, Warren said. I know. Tom leaned back in the booth. But there's something else you should know. Frank pulled me aside after the roundtable. He said Marcus made a comment during the dinner, said, some folks cling to the past like it's going to save them, but the future belongs to people who understand leverage. Warren picked up his coffee cup but didn't drink. The ceramic was warm against his palms. Frank also said Marcus laughed when someone mentioned your name, Tom added. Said you were yesterday's news. Said the airstrip would make a fine development property once the current complications were resolved. Development property. That meant subdivisions, houses, the end of everything his father had built. Warren set down the cup carefully, as if it might shatter. When's the next roundtable? 2 weeks. Marcus is calling it a progress report. Wants everyone to see how many farmers have signed up for his new program. Tom paused. I can't tell people not to work with him. I don't have that kind of authority, and some of them genuinely need help. I know. But I can slow walk any loan transfers that come through my bank. Buy you some time. Warren nodded. Outside, a truck rumbled past, its tire chains clanking against the wet pavement. The sound echoed off the brick buildings like distant machinery. Tom, Warren said, if Marcus's firm is using predatory lending practices, threatening foreclosure, manipulating farmers into bad contracts, is there anyone who would care? Tom considered this. State banking regulators, maybe, but you'd need documentation, proof. And even then, investigations take months. Ed Kowalski kept emails, didn't he? Tom's expression shifted. How'd you know that? Because Ed's methodical. 30 years running that farm taught him to document everything. Warren met Tom's eyes. Think he'd share them? Maybe, but the man's dying, his wife's scared. They need money now, not justice later. I'm not asking them to wait. I'm asking if they'd let me see what Marcus really said, before it's too late. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled a napkin from the dispenser and wrote down an address. Ed's in home hospice. His wife's name is Margaret. Don't upset her and don't stay long. He gets tired fast these days. Warren took the napkin and folded it carefully into his wallet. The deposition took place in a conference room that smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled air. 4 people sat around a fake wood table. Warren, Attorney Paulson, Diane's lawyer Gerald Morrison, and a court reporter whose fingers moved across her machine like she was playing piano. Morrison was 50s, expensive suit, the kind of jaw that looked good in courtroom photographs. He smiled when Warren entered, the smile of a man who'd already won and was just waiting for everyone else to acknowledge it. "Mr. Dalton," Morrison began, voice smooth as motor oil, "let's talk about your financial history, specifically the loans you provided to various individuals between 2008 and 2015. Warren glanced at Paulson, who gave a small nod. "Answer the question." "I helped some people during the recession," Warren said. "Helped. That's an interesting word." Morrison opened a folder and pulled out documents, copies of loan agreements, payment records, personal checks. "According to these records, you provided over $400,000 in unsecured loans to 6 separate parties, funds that came from trust income, income that legally qualifies as marital property." "Those loans were repaid," Warren said. "Some were, others weren't, but that's not my question." Morrison leaned forward. "My question is this. Did you inform your wife about these loans before making them?" Warren's jaw tightened. "No." "Did you discuss with her how trust income would be allocated?" "No." "Did she have any knowledge of your financial dealings with these individuals?" "She knew I helped people. She didn't know the details." Morrison smiled. "So you hid these transactions from her. You used what the court considers marital funds to play hero for your friends, without her consent or knowledge. Would you call that financial transparency, Mr. Dalton?" Paulson spoke up. "Objection. That's argumentative." Morrison waved a hand. "With you withdrawn. Let me phrase it differently. Mr. Dalton, would you characterize your financial relationship with your wife as one of full disclosure and mutual decision-making?" The court reporter's fingers kept moving. Outside the window, sleet had started to fall. Not quite rain, not quite snow. The glass was streaked with water. "I made business decisions," Warren said. "She made household decisions. That was our arrangement." An arrangement she never agreed to, according to her testimony. An arrangement that left her in the dark about the true scope of your assets and liabilities. Morrison flipped through more papers. "Mr. Dalton, generosity without transparency isn't partnership. It's control, and the court views this as financial infidelity." Warren felt the words land like fists. Financial infidelity. As if helping farmers keep their land was the same as betrayal. As if quiet generosity was somehow worse than loud selfishness. Paulson was talking, objecting, but Warren barely heard him. He was thinking about Ed Kowalski's farm, about the 3 families who'd signed with Marcus, about Diane's handwriting circling ownership structures on documents she'd stolen from his hangar. The deposition continued for another hour. When it ended, Morrison shook Paulson's hand and left whistling. Outside, the sleet had turned to freezing rain. Warren sat in his truck with the engine running, heat blasting, hands gripping the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. He couldn't make them relax. Paulson tapped on the passenger window. Warren unlocked the door and the lawyer climbed in, bringing cold air and the smell of wet wool. "That was bad," Paulson said. "I know. He's going to use your own decency against you, paint you as controlling, secretive. The judge will see a man who made unilateral financial decisions without his wife's input. In family court, that's blood in the water." Warren stared through the windshield at the parking lot. The rain was freezing as it hit the pavement, turning everything to ice. "Can we fight it?" he asked. "Not with what we have now. You'd need proof that Morrison and Marcus are colluding, something that shows this isn't just aggressive lawyering, it's conspiracy." Warren thought about Tom's napkin, about Ed Kowalski's emails, about Cal's discovery of the Sky Harvest aviation leases. Pieces of a puzzle, but not enough, not yet. "How long do I have?" Warren asked. "The refinance deadline is in 4 weeks. After that, the asset freeze triggers default clauses and Marcus can start foreclosure proceedings. You're running out of time, Mr. Dalton." Paulson got out of the truck and walked to his own car. Warren sat alone in the parking lot for 10 minutes, watching ice form on the windshield wipers. When he finally put the truck in gear and drove home, his hands were shaking. Inside the empty house, he found Diane's closet half empty and smelling faintly of her perfume. Something expensive he'd never been able to name. On the kitchen table sat a new stack of papers. Divorce settlement proposal. She wanted the house, the airstrip, and half of any assets discovered or undisclosed during proceedings. Warren sat down and put his head in his hands. Outside, the freezing rain turned to snow. Warren drove to the Kowalski farm on a Thursday afternoon when the sky was the color of dirty wool. The fields on either side of the gravel road lay fallow, last year's stubble poking through patches of melting snow. The farmhouse needed paint. The barn needed more than that. Margaret Kowalski answered the door before Warren could knock. She was 60 maybe, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and hands that shook slightly when she held the door open. "Tom called," she said. "Said you might come by." "I don't want to intrude, Margaret. I know this is a hard time." Every time's a hard time these days." She stepped back to let him in. The house smelled like soup and medicine and the particular staleness of illness. Ed's in the living room. He has good days and bad days. Today's somewhere in between. Ed Kowalski lay in a hospital bed that had been set up near the window. He'd lost weight. Warren could see that immediately. The man who'd lifted hay bales and wrestled equipment for 40 years had been reduced to angles and hollows, but his eyes were clear when they fixed on Warren. "War," Ed said. His voice was thin but steady. "Heard you're in some trouble." Warren pulled a chair close to the bed. Through the window, he could see the barn, and beyond it, the frozen fields that Ed had worked since he was 17. "Nothing I can't handle," Warren said. Ed made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Bullshit. Marcus Brentwood's got you by the throat, same as he's got me." Margaret brought coffee without being asked. The cups rattled slightly on the tray. She set them down and left the room, closing the door halfway. "Tom said you might have documentation, so," Warren said carefully. "About Marcus's offers, the terms he presented." Ed reached for a glass of water on the bedside table. Warren helped him, steadying the glass while Ed drank. When he was done, Ed gestured to a manila envelope on the windowsill. "Margaret wanted to burn it," Ed said. "Said it wouldn't help anybody, would just make things harder. But I'm a farmer, War. I document everything, dates, times, what was said, force of habit." Warren picked up the envelope. It was thick, overstuffed with papers. "Marcus came here 3 times, Ed continued. "First time, he was all smiles. Said Heartland wanted to help farmers struggling with medical debt. Second time, he brought paperwork. Third time, he brought an ultimatum." Ed paused to catch his breath. "He said if I didn't sign, he'd call my existing loans due immediately. Said I'd lose the farm anyway, but this way at least Margaret would have money for my funeral." Warren opened the envelope. Inside were printed emails, handwritten notes, even a recorded conversation transcript. Ed had documented everything. "There's a section in there about you," Ed said. "Page 12, I think. Marcus told me if I talked to you or accepted any help from you, he'd consider it a breach of good faith negotiation. Said Heartland would accelerate foreclosure immediately." Warren found page 12. The words were there in Ed's careful handwriting. MB states, "Warren Dalton is yesterday's news. Any farmer who ties himself to Dalton's sinking ship will go down with him. Heartland rewards loyalty. We punish poor judgment." "That's a direct threat," Warren said quietly. "It's business, according to Marcus. He calls it strategic lending. But War, it's extortion. He's using my cancer, using Margaret's fear to force a land sale at half its value, and he's doing it to 5 other farms in this county." Ed's breathing had gotten labored. "I can't fight him. I don't have time, but you can." Warren folded the papers carefully and put them back in the envelope. "Ed, I'm not asking you to risk Margaret's security. If signing with Marcus means she's taken care of—" "What it means," Ed interrupted, "is Marcus gets another piece of land he can flip for development. What it means is this farm, my father's farm, his father's farm, becomes a subdivision called Sunset Meadows or some such horse shit." He grabbed Warren's wrist with surprising strength. "You saved this place once. In '08, when the banks wouldn't talk to me, you gave me a loan with a handshake. Didn't ask for collateral, didn't charge interest, just said, 'Pay me back when you can.'" "You paid it back," Warren said. "Took me 7 years, but yeah. And you never once asked about it, never lorded it over me. That's the kind of man you are, War. So, don't you dare sit there and tell me not to risk anything for you." Ed released his wrist and fell back against the pillows, exhausted. "Take those papers. Use them. And when you take Marcus Brentwood down, you tell him Ed Kowalski sent his regards." Margaret appeared in the doorway. "He needs to rest now." Warren stood. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would capture what Ed's gesture meant. But Ed had closed his eyes, and words seemed inadequate anyway. At the door, Margaret touched Warren's arm. "He won't last till spring," she said quietly. "But he'll die knowing he did the right thing. That's worth more than Marcus Brentwood's money." Warren drove back to town through melting slush. The envelope sat on the passenger seat. Inside it was proof, real, documented proof, of Marcus's threats and manipulation. But proof meant nothing if Ed died before he could testify, and Marcus knew it. Warren pulled over at a rest stop and called Jenny. "I need you to come to Oak Ridge," he said when she answered. "I've got evidence, but I don't know what to do with it." Jenny was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, "I'll be there tomorrow." The Facebook post appeared on a Tuesday morning. Warren didn't see it himself. He'd never understood social media and didn't have an account. Rita Nordstrom showed it to him at the hardware store, thrusting her phone in his face while he was buying screws for the hangar door. The post was from Diane. The photo showed her and Marcus at the country club, both smiling, wine glasses raised. Marcus wore a suit that probably cost more than Warren's truck. Diane wore a dress Warren had never seen before. Emerald green. Expensive. The caption read, "After 30 years, I've learned that silence isn't strength, it's neglect. Moving forward with someone who sees my worth. New beginnings. No. Your value." "She posted it 2 hours ago," Rita said, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone delivering gossip disguised as concern. "Already has 63 comments." Warren handed back the phone. "I need 3-inch deck screws. Box of 50. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Rita pressed. "Everyone's talking about it. Let them talk." Warren paid for the screws and left, but people did talk. By evening, the post had been shared 40 times. The comment section had become a battleground. Some sided with Diane. 30 years was a long time to be married to a man who lived in a hangar. Others defended Warren in ways that made him uncomfortable. Frank had written, "Some people confuse quiet dignity with weakness. They learn the difference eventually." Tom Rickman's wife had posted, "Warren Dalton helped us save our home in 2009. Never asked for recognition, never asked to be repaid. That's character." Then someone named Sarah Hutchins wrote, "My dad got a loan from Warren during the recession." Anonymous. We didn't even know it was him until Dad saw Warren's signature on the paperwork. He kept our farm running for 3 years. Never mentioned it once. By midnight, 3 more farmers had shared similar stories. The narrative was shifting. Not dramatically, but enough that Marcus apparently noticed. Jenny arrived the next afternoon in a silver sedan that looked out of place on Oak Ridge's gravel roads. She was 38, tall like her father, with hair she kept short for practical reasons. She wore a blazer and carried a leather briefcase that had seen serious use. The hug was awkward. 15 years of distance couldn't be erased by one embrace, but it was something. "Show me what you've got," she said. They spread everything on Cal's workbench in the hangar. Ed's envelope, the Sky Harvest aviation leases, bank records, trust documents. Cal had organized it all with his methodical precision, each stack labeled and cross-referenced. Jenny worked in silence for 40 minutes, reading every page, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Her pen moved fast, scratching out bullet points and drawing arrows between concepts. She'd inherited Warren's focus, his ability to shut out everything except the problem in front of him. Finally, she looked up. "Dad, do you know what you have here? Evidence that Marcus is a crook?" "More than that," she tapped Ed's documents. "These show predatory lending and witness intimidation. That's bad for Marcus, but it's not fatal. Lots of lenders play hardball. But this," she pulled out the Sky Harvest aviation lease, "this is different." Cal leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. Warren waited. "Marcus's firm has been leasing jets from Sky Harvest Aviation since 2015, Jenny continued. 3-year contracts, renewed T, and the lease agreements list Sky Harvest as a preferred vendor. Marcus even bragged about the partnership in his company bio. I looked it up on their website. Strategic vendor relationships that maximize client value. That's a direct quote. So he's been using my planes, Warren said. I knew that yesterday. But he's also been suing you. His firm is representing Diane in a divorce that targets your assets, including the trust that owns 60% of Sky Harvest Aviation. That's a textbook conflict of interest. He's simultaneously a customer and an adversary. In some jurisdictions, that's grounds for disbarment. Warren felt something shift in his chest. Not quite hope, but close to it. Jenny wasn't finished. Better yet, his firm has been billing clients a 40% markup on the lease rates. I cross-referenced the Sky Harvest invoices with Heartland's public disclosures. They're required to report major vendor relationships to their board. The markup is standard practice, but the conflict isn't disclosed anywhere. That means Marcus has been profiting from your assets while trying to seize those same assets. That's fraud. She pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. I'm filing an ethics complaint with the state bar. It'll trigger an automatic review of Morrison's handling of the divorce case. If the bar finds evidence of collusion between Morrison and Marcus, both of them are looking at serious consequences. How long does a review take? Warren asked. 30 to 60 days for preliminary findings, but the complaint itself creates leverage. Morrison will know his partnership with Marcus is under scrutiny. That changes the calculus. Jenny smiled, not warmly, but with the cold satisfaction of someone who just found a winning move. Dad, you didn't just outplay Marcus. He's been playing checkers while sitting on your chessboard. He never even knew you owned the board. Cal laughed, a rare sound that echoed off the hangar's metal walls. I told you, War, check your instruments. Jenny gathered the documents and slid them into her briefcase. I'll need to stay a few days, file the paperwork, coordinate with the state regulators, maybe talk to Ed Kowalski if he's up for it. Where can I sleep? Guest room's yours, Warren said. Hasn't been used in a while, but the sheets are clean. When was I last here? Jenny asked quietly. Warren thought about it. Christmas, 4 years ago, maybe 5. You drove up for the day, left before dinner. I was angry at you. I know. I thought you cared more about that propeller than you did about family. Jenny looked around the hangar, at the Piper Pawnee, at Cal's workbench, at the tools hanging on the walls in careful order, and I didn't understand this place, what it meant to you. It's just a hangar, Warren said. No, it's not. She walked to the Piper and ran her hand along the wing. This is where you come to think, to remember Dad, Grandpa, to figure out who you are when nobody's watching. She turned back to face him. Mom never understood that. She thought you were hiding. But you weren't hiding, you were just being yourself. The wind outside had picked up. The walls creaked and the wind socks snapped taut, audible through the thin metal. The smell of engine oil and coffee and wood smoke filled the space. I should have called you sooner, Warren said. Yeah, you should have. Jenny's expression softened slightly. But I should have answered when you did call, so we're both stubborn idiots. Must be genetic. Cal cleared his throat. I'm going to let you two talk. Jenny, there's a diner on Main if you get hungry. Burgers are decent, coffee's terrible. After he left, father and daughter stood in awkward silence. Finally, Jenny said, Show me the propeller thing, the morning ritual. Warren hesitated, then nodded. He picked up the polish rag and the tin of compound from the shelf. They walked outside together into the cold afternoon. The propeller was dull, neglected for 3 days, while Warren dealt with lawyers and depositions and dying farmers. He began the familiar motion, slow circles, even pressure, working from hub to tip. Jenny watched for a minute, then asked, Can I try? Warren handed her the rag. She mimicked his movements, awkward at first, then finding the rhythm. The metal began to shine under her hands. Grandpa taught you this? She asked. Every morning before flight checks. He said a clean propeller means a clear mind. Did it work? Sometimes. Warren watched his daughter polish the blade, her movements becoming more confident. Sometimes you just need something to do with your hands while you figure out the hard stuff. They worked in silence as the sun dropped toward the horizon. The propeller gleamed. Somewhere in town a dog barked. A truck rumbled past on the county road. When they finished, Jenny stepped back and examined their work. It's beautiful, she said. It's just a propeller. No, Dad, it's not. She handed back the rag. Tomorrow I'll file the ethics complaint. We'll start building the case. But tonight, can we just have dinner? Just the two of us? Warren nodded. I'd like that. They walked back to the house as the temperature dropped and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Warren couldn't sleep. At midnight, he gave up trying and drove to the hangar. The roads were empty, the stars sharp in the cold sky. March had arrived, but winter held on with stubborn grip, frost on the windshields, ice in the shadows where sunlight never reached. Inside the hangar, he turned on only one light, the bare bulb over the workbench. The Piper sat in shadow, its propeller half gleaming from the work he and Jenny had done. He stood there for a long time, just looking at it. Then he pulled out his father's altimeter watch from his pocket and held it to the light. The crystal was scratched, the leather band was cracked, and had been replaced twice. But the mechanism still worked, still kept time the way it had when his father wore it during the war. Warren remembered the letter. His father had written it when Warren was 16, left it sealed with instructions not to open until he was old enough to understand. Warren had opened it the day after his 18th birthday. The letter was upstairs in the house, tucked in a drawer with other important papers. But Warren had memorized it years ago. Certain lines came back to him now, unbidden. Son, a man's worth isn't in what he takes from the world. It's in what he gives and what he refuses to become. Warren set the watch on the workbench. He picked up Ed's envelope, the documentation of Marcus's threats, his manipulation. his casual cruelty toward dying men and frightened wives, evidence that could destroy Marcus's career, maybe his freedom. Jenny had a plan: file the ethics complaint, coordinate with state regulators, build a case that would expose Marcus and Gerald Morrison both. It was clean, legal, righteous. But Warren knew something else. He could do more than expose Marcus. With the evidence in this envelope, with Jenny's legal expertise, with Tom's banking connections, he could ruin Marcus completely. Not just end his career, bankrupt him, make him suffer the way Warren had suffered, the way Ed Kowalski was suffering. The thought was tempting, more than tempting. Warren walked to the Piper and put his hand on the propeller. The metal was cold. He'd neglected it again these past 2 days, too focused on strategy and revenge to maintain the ritual. He thought about Marcus's face at the country club, the smug smile when he'd toasted to new beginnings. Thought about Diane's Facebook post, the casual dismissal of 30 years. Thought about the lawyer's voice at the deposition, financial infidelity. Warren could hurt them both, could make them pay for every slight, every humiliation, every moment of pain they'd caused. His father's words came back. What he refuses to become. Warren closed his eyes. The hangar was silent, except for the wind outside and the tick of his watch on the workbench. He stood there for 5 minutes, maybe 10, hand on the cold propeller. When he opened his eyes, he knew what he had to do. He wouldn't become Marcus, wouldn't use cruelty as a weapon, wouldn't grind people into dust just because he could. There was a difference between justice and vengeance, between protecting what mattered and destroying for the sake of destruction. Marcus had broken laws, had threatened people, had used his position to exploit the vulnerable. Those actions deserved consequences. Legal consequences, public consequences. Warren would make sure Marcus faced them, but he wouldn't enjoy it, wouldn't savor Marcus's downfall like a victory, because the moment he started taking pleasure in another man's suffering, he'd lose something essential, something his father had died protecting. Warren picked up the polish rag in the compound. He began working on the propeller, slow, methodical circles, the familiar motion that cleared his mind. The metal warmed under his hands. Slowly, gradually, the shine returned. He worked for an hour, maybe more, lost track of time. When he finished, both blades gleamed in the weak light. The Piper looked ready to fly, even though it hadn't left the ground in 3 years. Warren cleaned the rag and put away the polish. He checked his father's watch. 2:15 in the morning. He should go home, get some sleep. Tomorrow, Jenny would file the ethics complaint. The week after that, they'd meet with state regulators. The machinery of justice would begin its slow, grinding work. He walked to the hangar door and opened it. The cold air hit his face. Above, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Orion hung low in the west, the hunter with his belt and bow. His father used to point out the constellations. Used to say that a pilot needed to know the stars, because instruments could fail but the sky was always true. Warren pulled the door closed and locked it. He climbed into his truck and sat there for a moment, engine running, heat slowly building. Through the windshield, he could see the hangar, solid and simple against the night sky. The house was dark when he arrived. Jenny's rental car sat in the driveway, covered with frost. Warren went inside quietly, not wanting to wake her. But as he passed the guest room, he saw light under the door. "Dad?" Jenny's voice muffled. Warren opened the door. Jenny sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open, surrounded by papers. She'd been working. "Couldn't sleep either?" Warren asked. "Too much coffee. And I wanted to get the ethics complaint right the first time." She looked up at him. "Where were you?" "Hangar, polishing the propeller." Jenny smiled slightly. "Of course you were." She patted the bed beside her. "What? Come and look at this. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything." Warren sat down, and they bent over the laptop together, father and daughter, working toward the same goal for the first time in 15 years. Outside, the temperature dropped to 18 degrees and the stars slowly faded as dawn approached. April 10th arrived with clear skies and warming sun. Warren woke at 4:30, showered, and dressed in clean jeans and a pressed flannel shirt. He drank coffee standing at the kitchen window, watching the dawn light spread across the fields. Jenny came downstairs at 5, already dressed, briefcase in hand. "You ready for this?" "As ready as I'll get." Cal's truck pulled up 10 minutes later. They drove to Lincoln, in convoy, Warren and Jenny in his truck, Cal following behind. The highway was empty, the fields on either side showing the first green hints of spring planting. Lincoln Municipal Airport sat on the eastern edge of the city. The private terminal was separate from the main facility, a low glass building with polished floors and leather furniture. Warren had been here dozens of times over the years. Back when he flew regularly, the FBO manager, David Chen, had worked there for 20 years. They parked in the small lot and walked to the entrance. Through the glass walls, Warren could see the tarmac and beyond it, a Learjet 45 being fueled. The tail number was N847SH. Sky Harvest Aviation. His jet. His company. Marcus had no idea. David met them at the door. He was 50, trim, with graying hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen everything. "Warren, it's been a while." "Too long, David. This is my daughter, Jenny, and you remember Cal." David shook hands with both. "Your, requested arrangement is all set. Though I have to say, this is the most unusual pre-flight coordination I've ever done." "I appreciate your discretion," Warren said. "Well, you own the damn plane. Figure you're entitled to be here." David checked his watch. "Passengers are scheduled to arrive at 7:15, wheels up at 8. You want coffee while you wait?" They sat in the lounge area near the windows. Warren watched the fueling crew finish their work and disconnect the hoses. The jet gleamed in the morning light. Beyond it, the runways stretched toward the horizon. At 7:12, a black Mercedes pulled up to the terminal entrance. Warren's pulse quickened. Jenny touched his arm briefly, reassurance or warning, he wasn't sure which. Marcus Brentwood emerged from the driver's side. He wore a charcoal suit and carried a leather briefcase with gold initials, MB. His hair was styled, his shoes polished. He looked like a man who'd already won. Diane stepped out from the passenger side. She wore a cream-colored coat Warren had never seen, designer sunglasses, heels that clicked on the pavement. She looked younger somehow, lighter, as if 30 years of marriage had been weight she'd finally shed. They walked toward the terminal doors, Marcus's hand on the small of Diane's back, the same possessive gesture from the Rotary dinner. Through the glass, Warren could see them laughing about something. The doors opened. Marcus entered first, already pulling out his phone. Then Diane, adjusting her sunglasses. She saw Warren and froze mid-step. The sunglasses came off slowly. Her face went from confident to confused to pale in the span of 3 seconds. "Warren? What are you—" Marcus looked up from his phone. Saw Warren. His expression didn't change immediately. It took him a moment to register that something was wrong. "Dalton, what the hell are you doing here?" David Chen stepped forward, professional smile in place, iPad in hand. "Mr. Brentwood, Ms. Dalton, welcome. I have you scheduled for the Learjet 45, tail number November 847 Sierra Hotel. Should be ready for boarding in about 15 minutes. Just need to verify some details on the manifest." Marcus waved, dismissively. Fine. But I asked what he's doing here." David glanced at Warren, then back to Marcus. His expression remained perfectly neutral. "Oh, Mr. Dalton? He's here for the pre-flight inspection. Standard procedure when the owner wants to review the aircraft before departure." The word landed like a physical blow. Owner. Marcus's briefcase slipped from his hand. It hit the polished floor with a thud that echoed through the terminal. The gold initials caught the sunlight streaming through the windows. Diane's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes moved from Warren to the jet visible through the windows, to the Sky Harvest Aviation logo on the fuselage, back to Warren. "I'm sorry," Marcus said slowly. "Did you say owner?" Warren stood. He didn't hurry, didn't rush. Just stood and walked toward them with the measured pace of a man who had all the time in the world. "Morning, Diane," he said quietly. "Marcus, enjoy your flight to California." He paused, let the moment breathe. The plane's paid for. Always has been. Diane's hand went to her mouth. The color had drained completely from her face now. You own Sky Harvest Aviation, 60% equity since 2008. The trust structure kept my name off the public paperwork." Warren looked at Marcus. "Your firm's been leasing from me for 9 years, Marcus. Every executive flight, every client meeting, every trip to close a deal. You've been paying me the whole time." Marcus's face had gone from pale to red. "That's not— You can't—" Jenny stepped forward, all business, and handed Marcus her card. "Jenny Keller, attorney at law. I filed an ethics complaint with the state bar last week regarding your firm's conflict of interest in the Dalton divorce proceedings. You're leasing aircraft from the man you're simultaneously suing. The bar's investigative committee found your failure to disclose that relationship to be a serious violation of professional conduct. They'll be contacting you officially within 48 hours. She handed a second card to Diane. "Ms. Dalton, your attorney Gerald Morrison was also named in the complaint. His partnership with Mr. Brentwood, combined with his representation of you against Mr. Brentwood's vendor, constitutes collusion and breach of fiduciary duty. You may want to seek independent legal counsel." Marcus's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went from red to ashen. He answered, Yes, what? When did— His eyes cut to Warren, then away. "I'll call you back." He ended the call. His hand was shaking. "That was your managing partner," Jenny said. It wasn't a question. Marcus said nothing. Diane backed away from him, one step, then another. Her heels clicked on the floor. She turned to Warren, tears starting to form. "You never told me. Any of it. The investments, the company, the—" "You never asked," Warren said simply. "You just assumed I had nothing because I didn't spend like Marcus." Through the windows, the jet sat ready. The pilots were completing their pre-flight checks. The morning sun glinted off the polished fuselage. David Chin cleared his throat. "Mr. Brentwood, the aircraft is ready if you still want to—" "Cancel it," Marcus said hoarsely. "Sir?" "Cancel the goddamn flight." Marcus picked up his briefcase from the floor. His hands were trembling. He looked at Warren one more time, seemed about to say something, then turned and walked out of the terminal without another word. The Mercedes started. Tires squealed as Marcus drove away, too fast, leaving Diane standing alone in the terminal in her expensive coat and her designer heels. She stared at Warren. Tears were running down her face now, cutting tracks through her makeup. 30 years, she whispered. "I threw away 30 years because I thought you were nothing." Warren felt the weight of it. Not triumph, not vindication, but something heavier. Sadness for what they'd been, grief for what they'd become. "I was never nothing," he said quietly. "I was just quiet." Diane covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Jenny moved to say something, but Warren shook his head. Some pain needed space, not comfort. After a long moment, Diane lowered her hands. Her face was ruined, makeup smeared, eyes red. She looked old suddenly, fragile in a way Warren had never seen. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry, Warren." He nodded. "I know." She walked out slowly, unsteady on her heels, and called for a taxi from the parking lot. The terminal was quiet. David Chen had retreated to his office, giving them privacy. Through the windows, the jet began taxiing away, repurposed for another client, another destination. Cal put his hand on Warren's shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah," Warren said. "I think I am." Jenny hugged him, sudden and tight. "I'm proud of you, Dad." They stood there together, watching the jet take off and climb into the blue April sky. Ed Kowalski's funeral was held on a Thursday, 1 week after the confrontation at the airport. The service took place at First Lutheran, the same church where Warren had endured whispers and pitying looks back in January. Today, the whispers were different. The church was full, farmers in clean shirts and uncomfortable ties, neighbors who'd known Ed for 40 years, Tom Rickman and his wife, Rita and Frank Nordstrom. Even David Chen had driven up from Lincoln. Warren sat in the middle section with Jenny beside him. Cal sat behind them, his old dress uniform pressed and perfect despite 50 years in storage. Pastor Jim spoke about the land, about stewardship, about men who measured their lives in harvests and seasons. Margaret Kowalski sat in the front pew, composed despite her grief, holding hands with her daughter. When the pastor asked if anyone wanted to speak, Warren stood. He walked to the front slowly, aware of every eye on him. At the pulpit, he looked out at the congregation and saw faces he'd known his entire life. "Ed Kowalski taught me something important near the end of his life," Warren said. His voice was steady. "He taught me that truth costs something, but silence costs more." Ed knew Marcus Brentwood was threatening him, using his illness as leverage. He knew speaking up might cost his wife her security, but he documented everything anyway, because he believed some things matter more than safety. Warren paused. Through the church's tall windows, he could see green fields and blue sky. Ed didn't live to see Marcus Brentwood's firm close its regional office. Didn't see the state investigation, or the ethics hearings, or the foreclosure threats stopped. But he knew they were coming. And he died knowing he'd done the right thing. That's worth more than any amount of money Marcus could have offered. Margaret was crying quietly. Her daughter put an arm around her shoulders. "This town is built on people like Ed," Warren continued. "People who work the land, who keep their word, who help their neighbors without asking for recognition. Ed helped me understand that being quiet isn't the same as being silent. Sometimes the quietest people are the ones speaking the loudest truth." He looked at Margaret. "Ed saved my farm years ago. He just didn't know it. So thank you, Ed, for everything." Warren sat down. Jenny squeezed his hand. 3 weeks later, the paperwork was finalized. Diane signed the divorce settlement without contest. She dropped all claims to the airstrip, the house, the aviation investments. She moved to Omaha, Away from Marcus, away from Oak Ridge, away from 30 years of mistakes she couldn't undo. Marcus Brentwood's firm was under investigation by 3 separate regulatory agencies. The regional office had closed. Marcus himself had resigned and hired a criminal defense attorney. 3 of the farmers who'd signed Marcus's predatory loans had their contracts voided by court order. Tom Rickman's bank refinanced them at honest rates. Warren sat on the paperwork quietly, the way he did most things. On a Saturday morning in late April, Warren arrived at the hangar at dawn. The air smelled like warming soil and fresh coffee. The fields around the airstrip showed green shoots, corn, planted on time, reaching toward the sun. Jenny's car was already there. Warren found her inside, holding the polish rag, examining the propeller with a critical eye. "You started without me," Warren said. "Just checking your work." She handed him the rag. "You missed a spot." They polished together in comfortable silence, working the metal until it gleamed. Through the open hangar door, Warren could hear a tractor in the distance, could smell cut grass and aviation fuel and possibility. When they finished, Jenny stepped back to admire their work. "Think you'll ever fly it again?" Warren considered the question. The Piper Pawnee sat ready, propeller shining, engine maintained by Cal's careful hands. 3 years since it had left the ground. "Maybe," he said, "but right now, I'm exactly where I need to be." A robin sang from the fence post. The windsock fluttered in a gentle breeze, no longer frozen, no longer limp, just moving the way it was meant to. Jenny leaned against the workbench. "You know, Mom called me last week." Warren looked at her. "She wanted me to tell you she's sorry, really sorry. Not just for the divorce, but for never seeing you." Jenny paused. "I told her that some apologies come too late, but I also told her you're doing fine. Better than fine." Warren nodded. He picked up his father's altimeter watch from the bench and checked the time. The crystal was still scratched, the leather band was still cracked, but it kept time the way it always had, steady and true. "Come on," Jenny said. "Cal's bringing breakfast. Donuts from that place in town." They walked out together into the April morning. The sun was warm on Warren's face. The airstrip stretched before them, gravel and grass and possibility. Warren locked the hangar door, and they walked toward the house, father and daughter, leaving the gleaming propeller behind. The altimeter watch ticked. Time didn't stop. But sometimes, if you were lucky, it slowed down enough to let you catch your breath. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Warren didn't know about that. What he knew was this: truth is like spring. It comes when it's ready, not when you demand it. His father had written in that letter, all those years ago, that a man's worth isn't measured by what he takes from the world. It's measured by what he gives and what he refuses to become. Warren had almost forgotten that, almost let anger turn him into something his father wouldn't recognize. He'd lost his wife, lost 30 years of marriage to a woman who'd mistaken his silence for emptiness. But he hadn't lost himself. And past 67, that seemed like the only victory that truly mattered. 3 farms were planting on time. Ed Kowalski's widow kept the land, kept the name, kept the legacy her husband had died protecting. Tom Rickman refinanced 6 loans at honest rates, and the word spread quietly through the county that Oak Ridge took care of its own. Jenny came up from Lincoln once a month now. They didn't talk much, just polished the propeller, drank Cal's terrible coffee, watched the sunrise paint the fields gold. It turned out that was enough, more than enough. On a morning in early May, Warren stood at the hangar door with his daughter beside him. The Piper Pawnee gleamed in the dawn light, propeller catching the sun like a promise. In the distance, a jet passed overhead, Sky Harvest Aviation, engines humming steady, carrying someone toward whatever future they'd built for themselves. Jenny touched his arm. "Think you'll ever fly again, Dad?" Warren watched the jet disappear into the blue. Somewhere a tractor started, its engine coughing to life. The smell of diesel and cut grass and warm soil filled the air. A meadowlark sang from the fence line. "Maybe," he said. "But right now, I'm exactly where I need to be." His father's watch ticked against his wrist, steady as a heartbeat. Time didn't stop. It never did. But sometimes, if you were patient, if you were quiet, if you refused to become the thing that hurt you, sometimes time slowed down just enough to let you know you'd survived. And that was worth more than all the jets in the sky.